The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the road, throwing Clara against the worn leather seat. She clutched her carpetbag tighter. The only possession she'd brought from St. Louis besides the dress on her back and the letter folded carefully in her bodice pocket. The letter from Silas Gray. A man she'd never met, but who promised her a home, a name, and a life far from the squalor she'd known. Through the dust-caked window, she watched the landscape transform from the last vestiges of civilization into something wild and unforgiving. The earth had turned from brown to burnt red, cracked and split like old leather left too long in the sun. Mesquite and sagebrush dotted the endless expanse, their twisted forms the only interruption in the monotonous terrain. In the distance, mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks crowned with snow even in late spring. "Northern Texas, miss," the driver had told her that morning when they'd stopped to change horses. "Ain't no place for the faint of heart." Clara wasn't faint of heart. She couldn't afford to be. 23 years of life had taught her that much. Her father's drunken rages, the creditors who came calling, the night he'd tried to sell her to settle a gambling debt. All of it had led to this desperate gamble, a mail-order bride advertisement in the newspaper, correspondence with a rancher who needed a wife, and now this bone-jarring journey into the unknown. The other passengers, a preacher heading to El Paso and a merchant's wife returning from visiting family, had long since given up trying to make conversation. The heat was oppressive, even with the windows cracked open, and the dust coated everything, turning their clothes and skin the same dull ochre as the landscape. As the sun began its descent toward the jagged horizon, the stagecoach slowed. Clara peered out to see a cluster of buildings that barely qualified as a town. A general store, a saloon, what might have been a hotel, and a few other structures she couldn't identify. Beyond it, scattered ranches stretched into the distance. "Sweetwater Station," the driver called out. "End of the line for you, miss." Clara's heart hammered as she gathered her things. This was it. In her letters, Silas had promised to meet her here. She'd recognize him. He'd written, by his height and the silver band he wore on his right hand, his father's ring. She stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady after days of travel. The few townspeople visible stopped their activities to stare. A woman traveling alone to marry a stranger was spectacle enough for any frontier town. Clara smoothed her travel-stained dress and looked around. No tall man with a silver ring waited by the platform. She approached the station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers. "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for Mr. Silas Gray. He was supposed to meet me here." The man's expression shifted from curiosity to something Clara couldn't quite read. Pity, perhaps, or discomfort. He spat tobacco juice into a brass spittoon before answering, "You the mail-order bride from back east?" Heat flooded Clara's cheeks, but she lifted her chin. "I'm Miss Clara Morrison. Mr. Gray and I have been corresponding." The station master exchanged glances with another man who'd wandered over, drawn by the conversation. "Miss well, there ain't no easy way to say this. Silas Gray is dead. Been 3 days now." The world tilted. Clara gripped the edge of the wooden platform to steady herself. "Dead? But we were... How?" "Cattle rustlers," the second man said. "Hit the Gray Ranch 5 nights back. Shot Silas when he tried to stop him from taking his herd. His brother Luke got shot up pretty bad too, but he's still breathing. Barely." Clara's mind reeled. Dead. The man who'd promised her safety, security, a new life, gone before she'd even laid eyes on him. She was alone in a hostile land with no money for return passage and nowhere to go. The old panic clawed at her throat, the same feeling she'd had the night her father had dragged her toward the card table where his creditors waited. "The ranch," she heard herself say. "Where is the Gray Ranch?" The station master frowned. "Now, miss, you don't want to go out there. Luke Gray ain't in no condition for company. And with Silas gone? Where is it?" Clara's voice came out harder than she intended. "About 5 miles north. Follow the creek. But miss..." Clara was already walking away, her carpetbag clutched in one hand. She had nowhere else to go. And perhaps this Luke Gray could at least tell her something about the man who'd brought her all this way only to die before they could meet. She hired a wagon from the livery stable, using nearly the last of her money. The driver, a taciturn Mexican named Miguel, said little as they bounced along the rutted trail. The sun was setting by the time they crested a small rise, and Clara saw the ranch spread below. It was smaller than she'd imagined from Silas's letters. A main house built of adobe and rough timber, a barn that had seen better days, a few outbuildings, and a corral that stood mostly empty. The place had an air of neglect that spoke of recent tragedy. "You wait here, señorita," Miguel said, his first words since they'd left town. "I go see if anyone home." But Clara was already climbing down. She'd come this far. She wouldn't cower in the wagon now. Her boots raised small clouds of dust as she walked toward the house. The front door stood slightly ajar. "Hello?" she called. "Mr. Gray." No answer came. Clara pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by the dying light through grimy windows. A layer of dust covered everything, and there was a smell, medicine, old food, and something else, blood, maybe, or sickness. "Who's there?" The voice came from a room to her left, rough and weak. Clara followed the sound and found herself in what must have been a bedroom. A man lay on a narrow bed, his left arm bound in stained bandages and his legs splinted, even in the poor light. She could see the fever-bright shine of his eyes, the pallor of his skin beneath several days' growth of beard. This had to be Luke Gray. He looked nothing like she'd imagined Silas's brother, where she'd expected another rancher, weathered but strong. She found a man who might have been handsome once, but now looked half dead. Dark hair matted with sweat, sharp cheekbones made sharper by illness, and eyes that watched her with suspicion and something else. Pain, maybe, or resignation. "You lost, ma'am?" His voice rasped like sand on wood. "I'm Clara Morrison," she said, setting down her bag. I had an arrangement with your brother." Something flickered in those fever-bright eyes. "The mail-order bride. It wasn't a question. Silas is dead. I know. I'm sorry for your loss." He turned his face toward the wall. "You should go back where you came from." "I can't." The simple truth of it hung between them. "I spent everything I had getting here." Luke Gray said nothing for a long moment. When he finally looked back at her, his expression was unreadable. "Then I guess you're stuck. Same as me." Clara surveyed the room, the untended wounds, the empty water pitcher, the general air of a man who'd given up. She'd seen that look before, in her mother's eyes before the consumption took her, but she'd be damned if she'd let another person die on her watch, stranger or not. "When's the last time someone changed those bandages?" "Don't need your pity." "Good, because I'm not offering any." Clara rolled up her sleeves. "I'm offering practical help. You can accept it or you can lie there and rot. Your choice." For the first time since she'd entered, something almost like surprise crossed Luke Gray's features. Then, slowly, he nodded. Clara found water in a barrel outside, still reasonably fresh. She located clean cloth in a cupboard, along with a bottle of whiskey that would do for cleaning wounds. When she returned to the bedroom, Luke watched her with these unsettling eyes, but he didn't protest as she began to unwrap his bandages. The wounds were worse than she'd expected. A bullet hole in his upper arm, poorly stitched and showing signs of infection, and another in his thigh that had missed the bone by providence alone. Someone had tried to tend them, but not well enough. "This is going to hurt," she warned, uncorking the whiskey. "Can't hurt worse than getting shot," he said, but his jaw tightened when she poured the alcohol over the wounds. Clara worked in silence, cleaning and rebandaging with the efficiency born of too many years tending her father's drunken injuries. Luke endured it without complaint, though sweat beaded on his forehead and his breathing grew ragged. "You've done this before," he observed when she finished. "My mother was sickly. I learned young." She didn't mention her father. "When did you last eat?" "Don't remember." Clara found the kitchen, such as it was, and discovered salt pork, some withered potatoes, and cornmeal. Not much, but she could work with it. As she cooked, she tried not to think about the absurdity of her situation. She'd traveled hundreds of miles to marry a dead man, and now found herself nursing his broken brother in a failing ranch at the edge of nowhere. When she returned with a bowl of thin stew, Luke had managed to push himself up against the headboard. He accepted the food without comment, though she noticed his hands shook as he ate. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why stay? You don't know me. You didn't know Silas, not really. Why not just take whatever you can carry and try your luck in town?" Clara considered the question. The truth was complex. Part stubbornness, part having nowhere else to go, part something else she couldn't name. The way he'd looked at her. Maybe, like he expected her to leave, like everyone left. "Someone needs to tend those wounds properly or you'll die," she said simply. "After that, we'll see." Luke studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "There's a room at the end of the hall." "Was going to be—" He stopped, swallowed. "Silas had it fixed up nice. You can stay there." Clara collected her carpet bag and found the room he'd mentioned. It was indeed fixed up nice, simple but clean, with a brass bed and a washstand. Even a small mirror, a woman's room, prepared for a bride who would never see it. At least, not as intended. As she unpacked her few belongings, Clara caught sight of herself in the mirror. Trail dust and exhaustion had taken their toll, but underneath she saw the same determined set to her jaw that had gotten her this far. She'd survived her father, survived poverty, survived worse. She could survive this too. Outside, full dark had fallen. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to emerge. More stars than she'd ever seen in St. Louis. The vastness of it all, the land, the sky, the sheer emptiness, should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something else. Not hope exactly, but possibility. Tomorrow she would take stock of the ranch, see what could be salvaged. She would tend Luke Gray's wounds and try to keep him alive, because it was the right thing to do, and because she needed time to figure out her next move. She was practical enough to know that a woman alone in this territory had few options. None of them good. But tonight, for the first time in months, Clara Morrison lay down in a bed that wasn't moving, in a room that was hers even if temporarily, and felt something almost like peace. She'd come west to marry a stranger and start a new life. The stranger was dead, but the new life, well, that remained to be seen. In his room down the hall, Luke Gray stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of woman traveled hundreds of miles to marry a man she'd never met, then stayed to nurse his broken brother without being asked. He'd told her the truth. Silas was dead, and she should go, but she'd stayed anyway, and her hands had been gentle as she'd tended his wounds, her voice matter-of-fact rather than pitying. He closed his eyes, trying not to think about how those hands had felt, cool against his burning skin. He had no business thinking about his dead brother's intended bride at all. But in the darkness, with the fever pulling at him and the pain a constant companion, Luke allowed himself one moment of wondering what might have been different if Clara Morrison had come to this ranch for him instead. The thought followed him down into uneasy sleep, where Silas's voice echoed from somewhere far away. "Take care of things for me, little brother. Take care of everything." The fever broke on the fourth night. Clara had been dozing in the chair she'd pulled beside Luke's bed when his thrashing woke her. She found him soaked in sweat, eyes clear for the first time since she'd arrived. "Water," he rasped. She helped him drink, supporting his head with one hand. In the lamplight, she could see the sharp angles of his face more clearly, a strong jaw beneath the stubble, dark brows drawn together in what seemed to be their permanent position, and eyes the color of storm clouds. "The fever's broken," she told him. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot and left to rot for a week." His voice was rough but stronger. "Which I suppose I did." Clara changed his bandages by lamplight, noting with satisfaction that the angry red streaks of infection had begun to fade. Luke watched her work, saying nothing until she finished. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. What did you expect? Someone softer. Silas always liked. He stopped, jaw tightening. Doesn't matter now. Clara tidied up the medical supplies. Tell me about him. Your brother. Luke's expression closed off. Nothing to tell. He's dead. Over the following days, Clara established a routine. She rose before dawn to tend the few remaining chickens and the milk cow that had somehow escaped the rustler's notice. She cooked simple meals with her dwindling supplies, changed Luke's bandages, and began the overwhelming task of setting the house to rights. Luke proved to be a difficult patient. He resented his helplessness, snapping at her when she tried to help him sit up, refusing food when the pain made him nauseous. But Clara had dealt with difficult men before. She met his surliness with steady calm, neither coddling nor arguing. You always this stubborn? She asked one afternoon after he'd tried to stand on his injured leg and nearly collapsed. You always this bossy? He shot back, gripping the bedpost with white knuckles. When the situation calls for it. She helped him back to bed, ignoring his muttered curses. As she adjusted his splint, he caught her wrist. His hand was calloused, strong despite his weakness. Why are you doing this? The anger had drained from his voice, leaving only bewilderment. Clara looked at their joined hands. His sun darkened against her pale skin. Someone needs to... He released her, turning his face away. But later, when she brought his supper, he ate without complaint. As Luke grew stronger, Clara learned more about the ranch through observation and carefully neutral questions. The Gray brothers had built it up from nothing, starting with a small herd and expanding through sheer determination. Luke had served in the cavalry during the Indian Wars, returning home with a medal and wounds that went deeper than skin. Silas wrote that you were a soldier, Clara said one evening as she mended one of his shirts. Luke's expression darkened. Not anymore. He was proud of you. He tell you that in his letters? The bitterness in Luke's voice was sharp enough to cut. Tell you about his war hero brother? He said you were brave. Luke laughed, a harsh sound. Brave, that's one word for it. Clara set down her sewing. What's another? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was low. Broken, useless. Take your pick. I don't see a broken man. I see someone who survived. You don't know what you're looking at. That night, the nightmares came. Clara woke to the sound of Luke shouting, fighting invisible enemies in his sleep. She found him tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, calling out names she didn't recognize. Luke, she touched his shoulder gently. Luke, wake up. His eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. For a moment, he didn't seem to see her. Then recognition dawned, followed quickly by shame. Get out, he said roughly. You are having a nightmare. I said get out. Clara retreated, but she left his door open and sat in the hallway where she could hear if he needed help. After a while, his breathing evened out, though she doubted he slept again. The next morning, he wouldn't meet her eyes. She went about her morning routine as if nothing had happened, but she noticed he barely touched his breakfast. My father had nightmares, she said conversationally, refilling his coffee cup. After he came back from the war, used to wake the whole house. Luke's hand stilled on his cup. Which war? The war between the states. He fought for the Union. Never was the same after. That why he drank? Clara looked at him sharply. She hadn't mentioned her father's drinking. Luke's expression was carefully neutral, but she saw understanding in his eyes. Among other reasons, she said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people who knew too much about the ways war could follow a man home. There was a girl, Luke said suddenly. Back in town, Mary Catherine Doyle, prettiest thing you ever saw, red hair like fire, laugh like church bells. Clara waited, sensing this was important. I courted her before I left for the cavalry. Promised I'd marry her when I got back. She promised to wait. His laugh was bitter. She kept that promise right up until she saw me get off the stage. Took one look at the way I walked, the cane I needed, and suddenly remembered she'd promised to help her aunt in Dallas. I'm sorry. Don't be. She did me a favor, showing her true colors. He gestured at his leg. Who'd want to tie themselves to this? Someone who values the man more than the injury. Luke's eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. You don't know me, Clara. Don't make the mistake of thinking you do. But she was learning. Through the long days of his recovery, she pieced together the fragments he let slip. How he'd taken an Apache arrow to the thigh defending a supply wagon. How infection had nearly killed him, leaving him with a permanent limp and pain that never quite left. How he'd come home to find his beloved Mary Catherine being courted by the banker's son, a man with 2 good legs and no nightmares. Clara shared her own stories in return, carefully edited. She told him about her mother's illness, the way she'd wasted away despite Clara's best efforts. She mentioned her father's debts, his temper, but not the worst of it. Not the night he'd dragged her to that poker game, offering her up like she was nothing more than currency. Not the desperate escape, the way she'd answered Silas's advertisement like a drowning woman grasping for rope. One evening, a late spring storm rolled in, bringing sheets of rain and hail that hammered the roof like gunfire. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour, and Clara built up the fire in the main room, grateful they'd had the foresight to bring in extra wood. Luke had managed to make it to the settee with the help of a crutch she'd fashioned from a broken hoe handle. He sat staring into the flames while she prepared their supper, beans and cornbread. Again, their supplies were running dangerously low. "We'll need to go to town soon," she said, bringing him a plate. "We're almost out of everything." "With what money?" Luke's voice was flat. "Rustlers took the herd. That was everything we had." Clara had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach tighten. "There must be something." "There's nothing." He set his plate aside untouched. "Silas spent what savings we had on." He gestured vaguely at her. "Making things nice. For you." The words stung, though she knew he hadn't meant them cruelly. She was an expense, another mouth to feed when they could barely feed themselves. Thunder crashed overhead, making them both jump. The wind howled through the gaps in the walls, and somewhere a shutter banged repeatedly. Luke struggled to his feet. "Where are you going?" "That shutter'll tear off if someone doesn't secure it." "You can barely walk." "I'm not an invalid." The words came out sharper than he'd probably intended. He gripped his crutch, face set with determination. "I can still take care of my own place." Clara watched him struggle with the door, the wind nearly tearing it from his grasp. Rain slashed sideways across the porch. She grabbed her shawl. "At least let me—" "No." He turned on her, eyes blazing. "I don't need your pity. Clara, I don't need you playing nursemaid. I don't need—" His bad leg buckled. Clara caught him before he fell, her arms going around his chest. For a moment, they stood frozen, pressed together in the doorway with the storm raging around them. She could feel his heart hammering against her palms, smell the soap she'd made him use that morning mixed with something uniquely him, leather and wood smoke and male sweat. Their eyes met. Something shifted in Luke's expression, the anger melting into something else. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Clara's breath caught, then lightning split the sky, breaking the spell. Luke pulled away so abruptly she almost fell. "The shutter," he said roughly, not looking at her. Together, they fought their way onto the porch. Clara held him steady while he wrestled the shutter into place, both of them soaked within seconds. By the time they stumbled back inside, they were shivering. "You're frozen," Luke said, noticing her chattering teeth. "So are you." They stood dripping in the doorway, suddenly awkward. Clara was acutely aware of how her wet dress clung to her body, the way Luke's shirt had gone transparent with rain. He seemed to realize it at the same moment, turning away. "You should change before you catch cold." Clara fled to her room, heart still racing. She peeled off her wet things with trembling fingers, trying not to think about the way Luke had looked at her, the gentle touch of his hand on her face. This was madness. She'd come here to marry his brother. She was here out of necessity, nothing more. But when she returned to the main room in dry clothes, she found Luke had changed too and built up the fire. He'd set out blankets on the floor in front of the hearth. "Thought you might want to warm up," he said without looking at her. They sat together before the fire, not touching but close enough that Clara could feel the heat from his body. The storm raged outside, but inside, the only sound was the crackle of flames and their quiet breathing. "I'm sorry," Luke said finally. "For snapping at you. You've been nothing but kind, and I've been wounded," Clara finished. "Not just in body." He looked at her then, firelight playing across his features. "Silas was the one who was good with people, good with words. I never knew how to talk to women even before." He gestured at his leg. "You're talking to me. You're different." Clara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Because I'm desperate? Because I have nowhere else to go? Because you stayed." His voice was quiet, intense. "Because you look at me and see a man worth saving, even when I don't see it myself." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Clara found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something stronger than reason. Luke's hand found hers beneath the blanket, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Clara," he whispered, and her name on his lips was like a prayer. She didn't know who moved first. One moment they were sitting apart. The next, she was in his arms, his mouth on hers with desperate hunger. He tasted of coffee and loneliness, and his hands tangled in her still damp hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. Luke released her abruptly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. You were Silas's. I never met him," Clara said firmly. "I answered an advertisement. We exchanged letters. That's all." "But you came here for him." "I came here for a new life." She touched his face, feeling the roughness of his jaw. "Maybe I found it." Luke caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. In his eyes, she saw the war between want and honor, between the man he was and the man he thought he should be. Outside, the storm began to ease, but neither of them moved. They sat before the dying fire, hands clasped, two broken people finding something whole in each other's presence. It wasn't what either of them had planned. But then, Clara reflected, very little in life went according to plan. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, empty coffers, dwindling supplies, the censure of a town that would surely gossip about the mail-order bride living with her dead fiancé's brother. But tonight, with Luke's thumb tracing circles on her palm and the warmth of the fire holding back the cold, Clara allowed herself to hope that she'd found something worth staying for after all. The whispers started the moment Clara stepped into Harmon's general store. Women in calico dresses huddled near the fabric bolts, their voices dropping to hisses as she passed. Men lounging by the pickle barrel straightened, eyes following her progress with undisguised interest. Clara kept her chin high, focusing on her meager list. Flour, salt, coffee if they could afford it. Luke had finally been able to tell her where Silas kept the emergency money, barely enough for a month's supplies if she was careful. Well, the voice came from behind her, oily and familiar. "Clara Morrison?" She turned slowly, her stomach dropping. Harmon Briggs stood there, the same predatory smile she remembered from St. Louis splitting his pockmarked face. He'd gotten heavier, his clothes finer, but the eyes were the same, cold and calculating. "Mr. Briggs." She kept her voice level. "I didn't know you were in Texas." "Came out 6 months ago. Got a nice setup running cattle to the rail lines." He stepped closer, and Clara fought the urge to retreat. "Heard about you answering that advertisement? Mail-order bride." He said the words like they tasted bad. "Shame about Gray dying before you could make it legal." Clara turned back to the counter. "Mrs. Harmon, I need 2 pounds of flour, please." The shopkeeper's wife, a thin woman with disapproving eyes, moved with deliberate slowness. "That'll be credit, I assume, since the Gray Ranch ain't got no money coming in." "I have cash." "Do you now?" Harmon leaned against the counter. Too close. "And where's a woman like you getting cash, living out there with the other Gray boy? No marriage certificate to make it proper." Clara's hands clenched around her purse. "Mr. Gray was injured defending his property. I'm helping with his recovery. That what they're calling it these days? A woman behind them tittered, and Clara recognized her as the banker's wife. Recovery? Seems to me, Harmon continued, voice carrying through the store. A decent woman would have headed back east when her intended died, instead of setting up house with his brother. I had no money for return passage, Clara said quietly. I offered to pay your debts once, back in St. Louis. Offer still stands. His hand brushed her arm, and Clara jerked away. Course, the price might have gone up some, considering your circumstances. Leave the lady alone, Briggs. The voice came from the doorway. Clara turned to see an older man in a sheriff's star, weathered face set in disapproving lines. Just reacquainting myself with an old friend, Sheriff Watson. Harmon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Miss Morrison and I go way back, don't we, Clara? We knew each other briefly in St. Louis, Clara said carefully. I need to finish my shopping. You do that. Harmon tipped his hat mockingly. I'll be seeing you around. Count on it. He sauntered out, leaving Clara standing at the counter with every eye in the store on her. Mrs. Harmon wrapped her purchases with obvious reluctance. Lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. $2.30. Clara counted out the money, aware of the whispers starting up again behind her. Shameful, someone muttered. Living in sin. Poor Silas not even cold in his grave. Always knew them mail-order types were no better than... Clara grabbed her packages and fled. Outside, she nearly collided with Sheriff Watson. Miss Morrison. He touched his hat. Might have a word. I need to get back. Mr. Gray needs... Won't take but a minute. His tone was kind but firm. I knew Silas and Luke's daddy. Good man. Hate to see his boy's reputation tarnished. Clara's cheeks burned. I'm only nursing Mr. Gray through his injuries. I'm sure that's true. But folks talk. Unmarried woman, unmarried man, living under the same roof. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. Might be best if you found other arrangements. There are no other arrangements. I have no money and nowhere to go. Harmon Briggs seems willing to help. Clara's stomach turned. I'd rather starve. The sheriff studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Briggs is a hard man, but he's got influence in this town. You'd do well not to make an enemy of him. I'm not looking to make enemies of anyone. I just want to be left in peace. Peace is hard to come by out here, miss, especially for a woman in your position. He touched his hat again. You take care now. Clara drove the borrowed wagon back to the ranch with shaking hands. The encounter with Harmon had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. She'd thought she'd left him behind in St. Louis, along with her father's debts and degradation. But men like Harmon were like bad pennies. They always turned up. She found Luke attempting to repair a broken fence rail, sweat soaking his shirt despite the cool morning. He'd abandoned the crutch, though she could see the strain in every movement. You shouldn't be doing that yet, she said, climbing down from the wagon. Fence won't fix itself. He didn't look at her, focusing on the rail with unnecessary intensity. Something in his tone made her stomach tighten. What's wrong? Miguel came by while you were gone, brought news from town. Now he did look at her, and his expression was carefully blank. About you and some cattle buyer named Briggs. Clara's heart sank. What did he say? That Briggs was telling anyone who'd listen about the fallen woman he knew in St. Louis. The one whose daddy tried to sell her to pay poker debts. The one now playing house with a cripple for room and board. The words hit like physical blows. Clara gripped the wagon seat for support. Luke, Is it true about your father? She closed her eyes. Yes. And Briggs? He was one of the men at the poker game. He offered to pay my father's debts in exchange for... She couldn't finish. Luke's hands tightened on the fence rail until his knuckles went white. But you got away. I ran, answered Silas's advertisement the next day. I thought I'd never see Harmon again. Well, he's here now, and he's making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are. The bitterness in Luke's voice cut deep. Or what kind they think you are. Does it matter what they think? Yes. He turned on her, eyes blazing. It matters because I can't protect you. Can't call him out. Can't defend your honor. Can't even walk into town without this damn limp reminding everyone that I'm half a man. You're not... Don't. He held up a hand. Just don't. They unloaded the supplies in tense silence. Clara could feel the weight of the town's judgment pressing down on them both. She'd become exactly what she'd fled St. Louis to avoid. A woman with a ruined reputation, dependent on a man who wasn't her husband. That evening, Luke was quiet through dinner. Clara had made biscuits with the new flour, but he barely touched them. You should leave, he said suddenly. Take what money we have left. Get to a bigger town where nobody knows you. Start over. And leave you here alone? You can barely manage. I managed before you came. His voice was harsh. I'll manage after. Clara set down her fork. Is that what you want, for me to leave? He wouldn't meet her eyes. It's what's best. For who? For you. Don't you understand? He shoved back from the table, pacing despite his limp. Every day you stay here, your reputation gets worse. Soon you won't be able to show your face in town. And for what? To nurse a broken-down soldier who can't even defend you from men like Briggs. I don't need defending. Everyone needs defending sometimes. His voice dropped. And I can't do it. Can't provide for you properly. Can't make an honest woman of you. Can't do anything but drag you down with me. Clara stood, moving to block his restless pacing. I'm not asking you to do any of those things. Then what are you asking? She looked up at him, this proud, wounded man who thought his worth was measured in what he could no longer do. I'm asking you to let me stay, to let me choose for myself. Even if that choice ruins you? I was ruined the night my father tried to sell me. Everything since has been borrowed time. She touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. At least here, with you, I feel useful, wanted, even if just for my nursing skills. Luke caught her hand, his grip almost desperate. You're wanted for more than that. The admission hung between them, raw and dangerous. Clara's heart raced as Luke pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cradle her face. This is madness, he whispered. I know. They'll crucify us both. Let them. He kissed her then, not gentle like that night by the fire, but with a fierce need that matched her own. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara saw her own reckless hope reflected in his eyes. A sound from outside made them both freeze. Horses, several of them, approaching fast. Luke grabbed his rifle from above the door, checking the load with practiced efficiency. Stay inside, he ordered. But Clara was already at the window. Her blood ran cold. It's Harmon. He's brought friends. 5 men dismounted in the yard. Harmon at their head, even in the fading light. Clara could see the satisfaction on his face. Luke stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Evening, gentlemen. Something I can help you with. Just come to make a business proposition. Harmon called out. About the woman. Miss Morrison isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Harmon's smile was ugly. Heard you boys lost your herd. Ranch can't last long without income. I'm willing to be generous. Clear your debts. Maybe even leave you enough to start over somewhere else. All you got to do is send her out. Luke's voice was deadly quiet. Get off my land. Now. Don't be hasty. Woman like that. She knows what she's worth. Don't you... Clara? Harmon raised his voice. I know you're listening. Remember that night in St. Louis? Your daddy knew your value? $20, wasn't it? To clear his debts? Shame washed over Clara in waves, but Luke never flinched. I said get off my land. Won't ask again. You threatening me? Cripple? One of Harmon's men laughed. What you gonna do? Limp at us? The rifle in Luke's hands never wavered. I've got 6 shots. 5 of you. Want to test whether this bum leg affects my aim? The laughter died. These men might mock a cripple, but they knew Luke Gray's reputation as a marksman. The cavalry medal wasn't for show. Harmon's expression hardened. This isn't over. Woman's got debts to pay, one way or another. Only debt she owes is to me, Luke said evenly, for room and board, which is between us and none of your concern. Everything in this town is my concern. Harmon mounted his horse with sharp, angry movements. You've made a mistake, Gray, both of you. They rode off in a cloud of dust, but Clara knew they'd be back. Men like Harmon always came back. Luke lowered the rifle slowly, and she saw how his hands trembled. The confrontation had cost him, both physically and in pride. He'd been forced to stand there and listen to her shame laid bare, unable to do more than threaten. Luke, pack your things. His voice was flat, defeated. I'll take you to the stage in the morning, give you what money we've got. I'm not leaving. He whirled on her. Didn't you hear him? He won't stop. He'll make your life hell, and I can't. His voice cracked. I can't stop him. Then we face him together. With what? I've got nothing. Clara, no money, no men, no way to protect you except this rifle and a reputation that's worth less every day. Clara moved to him. Taking the rifle and setting it aside, she placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palms. I've been running my whole life, she said quietly. From my father, from men like Harmon, from every place that tried to make me small. I'm tired of running. He'll destroy you. He'll try. She looked up at him, letting him see her determination. But I've survived worse than Harmon Briggs, and I'd rather face him here, with you, than spend another day looking over my shoulder alone. Luke pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. You deserve better than this, better than me. I deserve to choose, she whispered back, and I choose you. They stood there as darkness fell, holding each other while the weight of the coming storm pressed down on them. Clara knew Harmon would make good on his threats, knew the town would turn against them even more, knew that love might not be enough to overcome the harsh realities of their situation. But for now, in Luke's arms, with his heartbeat strong beneath her ear, she allowed herself this moment of peace. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Home. Spring arrived in earnest, painting the harsh landscape with unexpected beauty. Wildflowers bloomed in defiant patches of blue and yellow, and the creek ran full from mountain snowmelt. Clara threw herself into transforming their little corner of the world, as if she could hold Harmon's threats at bay through sheer force of will. She planted a kitchen garden with seeds bought on credit from the one merchant who still dealt with them, an elderly Mexican woman who ran a small shop on the edge of town. Tomatoes, beans, squash, anything that might stretch their meager resources through the coming months. Luke worked alongside her when his body allowed, though the pain still came in waves that left him gray-faced and shaking. He'd fashioned a proper cane from mesquite wood, its handle worn smooth from use. Together, they repaired what they could, patching the barn roof, mending fences, fixing the chicken coop that had been destroyed in the raid. You're good at this, Luke said one afternoon, watching Clara coax water from the well's temperamental pump. She pushed a strand of hair from her face, leaving a streak of dirt. I told you I was practical. No, it's more than that. He leaned against the fence post, studying her. You make things grow, make them better just by touching them. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. These past weeks, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day. But at night, they retreated to their separate rooms, the memory of their kiss a living thing between them. I've always liked growing things, she said, focusing on the pump handle. My mother had a garden before she got sick, just a small patch behind our tenement, but she made it beautiful. Tell me about her. It had become their pattern, sharing pieces of themselves while they worked, building trust along with fences. Clara told him about her mother's gentle hands, her father's transformation from loving husband to bitter drunk, the slow slide into poverty and desperation. Luke shared his own memories, growing up wild on the ranch with Silas, their parents' death from fever when he was barely 16, the choice to join the cavalry partly for adventure, partly to send money home. Silas was always the responsible one, he said, helping Clara carry water to the garden. Kept the ranch going while I played soldier. Then I came back broken, and he had to carry me too. You're not a burden, Clara said firmly. You never were. Luke's smile was rueful. You didn't know me those first months. Couldn't walk, couldn't work, couldn't do anything but lie in bed and wish I'd died with honor instead of living with shame. What changed? He was quiet for a moment, watching her water the fragile seedlings. Silas refused to give up on me, pushed me, bullied me, wouldn't let me wallow, said the ranch needed both of us if it was going to survive. His voice dropped. Now it's just me, and I'm not enough. Clara set down the water bucket and took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. You're enough. More than enough. Something shifted in his expression, the careful wall he maintained crumbling. He pulled her against him, and Clara went willingly, their mouths meeting with desperate hunger. His cane clattered to the ground as he pressed her back against the fence post, hands tangling in her hair. Clara, he breathed against her lips. We can't, I can't, I don't care. She kissed him again, tasting sunshine and possibility. I don't care what anyone thinks. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Luke rested his forehead against hers. You're going to be the death of me, woman. Better than the life you were living before. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Can't argue with that. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching hooves. Luke retrieved his cane quickly, hand moving to the pistol he'd taken to wearing. But it was only Miguel, the wagon driver who'd first brought Clara to the ranch. Senor Gray, Senorita Morrison. He tipped his hat, pretending not to notice their disheveled appearance. I bring supplies from Senora Martinez. She say you pay when you can. Clara helped unload the wagon. Flour, beans, salt pork, and blessed coffee. More than they'd asked for. More than they could afford. Please thank her for us, Clara said. Tell her. She say no thanks needed. She remember when Senor Silas helped her son with the law trouble. Good men deserve good neighbors. Miguel paused, glancing between them. But perhaps you should know, Senor Briggs. He makes more trouble in town. Says he will buy up your debts. Force you out. Luke's jaw tightened. Let him try. After Miguel left, they worked in tense silence. The temporary peace of the afternoon had shattered, reality crashing back. That night, Clara made a meal from their new supplies, but neither had much appetite. He won't stop, Luke said finally. Not until he gets what he wants. Then we make sure he can't. Clara pushed her plate away. There has to be something, some way to save the ranch, make enough money to pay the debts. With what? We've got no cattle, no horses worth selling, nothing but land that's worth less every day without stock to run on it. Clara stood, pacing the small kitchen. What about wild horses? I've seen them from the ridge. Mustangs? Luke shook his head. Even if we could catch them, I can't break horses anymore, not with this leg. Then teach me. He stared at her. You're serious? Why not? I can ride. I'm strong. I learn fast. You could get killed. Wild horses aren't like the gentle mares you probably rode back east. Nothing out here is gentle. Clara shot back. That doesn't mean we give up. Luke was quiet for a long moment, then slowly nodded. There's an old Mustanger named Tom Brennan lives about 10 miles north. Might be willing to help, if he's sober. But Clara, I know the risks. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not afraid. Over the next days, they prepared. Luke taught her about ropes and knots, about reading horse behavior, about the patience and cunning needed to outsmart wild creatures. His hands covered hers as he showed her how to throw a lasso, and Clara treasured these moments of closeness, storing them against whatever darkness lay ahead. One evening, as they sat mending tack by lamplight, Luke said suddenly, I loved her, you know, Mary Catherine, or thought I did. Clara kept her eyes on her work, sensing this was important. Loved the idea of her. Maybe this perfect girl who'd wait for her soldier to come home. when she took one look at my ruined leg and ran. He sighed. I thought that was the worst betrayal I'd ever face. And now I know she did me a favor. His voice was soft. If she'd stayed, I'd never have known what real courage looks like. Never have met a woman who sees broken things and decides to fix them instead of running away. Clara's hand stilled. Luke, I'm falling in love with you. Clara Morrison. The words came out in a rush. I know I shouldn't. Know you deserve better, but I can't seem to stop. Clara set aside the bridle she'd been mending and moved to kneel beside his chair. Then don't stop. He cupped her face with trembling hands. I've got nothing to offer you. No security, no future, no... She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her feelings into the contact, the gratitude, the desire, the growing love she'd been afraid to name. When they parted, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. I don't need promises, she whispered. I just need you. That night, when Clara retreated to her room, Luke followed. They stood in the doorway, both knowing that crossing this threshold would change everything. Are you sure? Luke's voice was rough. Instead of answering, Clara took his hand and drew him inside. In the moonlight filtering through the window, she began unbuttoning her dress with steady fingers. Luke watched, transfixed, as she revealed herself to him. Not just her body, but her trust, her choice, her love. Clara. Her name was a prayer on his lips as he moved to her, his hands reverent as they explored her skin. They came together with desperate tenderness, two wounded souls finding healing in each other's arms. Luke worshipped her body with his mouth and hands, whispering broken endearments against her skin. Clara arched beneath him, giving herself completely, holding nothing back. When he hesitated, his bad leg trembling, she guided him, showing without words that his physical limitations meant nothing to her. They moved together in ancient rhythm, their joining both fierce and gentle, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Afterward, they lay entwined in Clara's narrow bed, skin cooling in the night air. Luke traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his expression soft with wonder. I never thought... He stopped, started again. After Mary Catherine, after the war, I never thought I'd feel whole again. Clara turned in his arms, pressing a kiss to the scar tissue on his shoulder. You were always whole. You just couldn't see it. They made love again as dawn broke. Slower this time, learning each other's rhythms and responses. Clara discovered that Luke's hands, so skilled with rope and rifle, could play her body like a finely tuned instrument. Luke found that this practical, determined woman turned to liquid fire in his arms, her passion matching his own. Later, as they dressed for the day's work, a new ease existed between them. The careful distance they'd maintained had dissolved, replaced by casual touches and shared glances that spoke volumes. No regrets? Luke asked, watching Clara pin up her hair. She turned to him, her expression serene. None. You? He pulled her close, kissing her with quiet intensity. Only that I waited so long. They emerged from the house to find Tom Brennan waiting in the yard, a grizzled old Mustanger with knowing eyes. If he noticed their new closeness, he didn't comment, focusing instead on the business of catching wild horses. Heard you folks need help, he said, spitting tobacco juice. Also heard Briggs is causing trouble. Never did like that snake. We can't pay much, Luke said honestly. Don't need much. Just a share of what we catch. Tom looked at Clara appraisingly. You ever worked horses, girl? I'm a fast learner. Tom grinned, showing missing teeth. We'll see about that. As they headed out to scout the Mustang herds, Clara riding between the two men, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. They faced long odds. Certainly. Harmon Briggs wouldn't give up easily. The town's censure weighed heavily, and their financial situation remained precarious. But she had Luke beside her, his love a shield against the world's cruelty. She had work that mattered, neighbors who helped despite the gossip, and the vast Texas sky stretching endlessly above. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered Silas's advertisement, but perhaps it was the life she was meant to have all along. Ready for this? Luke asked as they crested a ridge, the Mustang herd visible in the valley below. Clara met his gaze, saw her own determination reflected there. I'm ready for anything. The man who arrived 3 weeks later wore a black suit despite the heat and carried a leather portfolio that meant only one thing: legal trouble. Clara watched from the garden as he dismounted, dusting off his coat with a fastidious care before approaching the house, where Luke waited on the porch. Mr. Lucas Gray. Just Luke. Luke didn't move from his chair, though Clara saw his hand drift toward the rifle propped against the wall. What can I do for you? Josiah Whitman, attorney at law. I represent Mr. Cornelius Gray of Austin. The lawyer withdrew a document from his portfolio. I'm here regarding the disposition of this property following the death of Silas Gray. Clara's hand stilled on the bean plants she'd been tending. Cornelius. She remembered Luke mentioning him once, a cousin who'd gone east to make his fortune, leaving the hard work of ranching to others. Silas left no will, Luke said evenly. Ranch passes to next of kin. That's me. Ah, but that's where things become complicated. Whitman's smile was thin as paper. Mr. Cornelius Gray is also next of kin, and unlike yourself, he has the means to properly develop this property. He's prepared to make you a generous offer, $500 to relinquish any claim. Ranch is worth 10 times that. Was worth 10 times that, before the cattle were stolen and the debts mounted. The lawyer consulted his papers. I believe you owe $300 to various creditors in town. My client would be willing to assume those debts as part of the arrangement. Luke stood slowly, leaning on his cane. Get off my land? Mr. Gray, please be reasonable. You can't work this ranch properly in your condition, and with your current domestic situation. His eyes found Clara. No bank will extend you credit. Take the money. Start fresh somewhere else. I said get out. Whitman replaced his papers carefully. You have 2 weeks to consider. After that, my client will pursue other legal avenues. Good day. After the lawyer left, Luke slumped against the porch post. Clara went to him, not caring that her hands were dirty as she touched his arm. We'll fight this, she said. With what? He's right about the banks. And without Silas's will, Luke's voice was hollow. Maybe we should take the money, get you somewhere safe, away from Briggs and all this mess. I'm not going anywhere. Clara moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. This is our home. We'll find a way. That evening, as they sat at the kitchen table poring over what papers they had, Clara remembered something. The night I arrived, you were delirious with fever. You kept talking about a box. Said Silas told you to keep it safe. Luke frowned. I don't... Wait. His expression cleared. The strong box. Silas kept important papers in it. But I haven't seen it since before the raid. They searched the house systematically, Clara taking the main rooms while Luke checked the outbuildings. It was nearly midnight when Clara noticed a loose floorboard in Silas's room. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a metal box. Luke, she called. Inside the box were deed papers, old photographs, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope marked Last Will and Testament of Silas Gray. Luke's hands shook as he opened it. They read by lamplight. Clara pressed close to his side. The will was simple. Dated just a month before Silas's death, he left everything to Luke, with one provision that made Clara's breath catch. Should my brother Luke marry Miss Clara Morrison, whom I have corresponded with and who has agreed to come to Texas as my bride, I hope he will treat her with all the kindness and respect I would have shown her myself. She is a woman of courage and worth, deserving of love and protection. He knew, Clara whispered. Somehow, he knew. Luke set the paper down carefully. This changes things. With the will, Cornelius has no claim. He turned to her, expression intense. But Clara, you heard what he wrote about marriage. Silas wanted me to be protected. He was a good man. Yes, he was. Luke took her hands. Clara Morrison, I've got nothing to offer you but a failing ranch, a passel of debts, and a broken-down soldier who loves you more than life. But if you'll have me—" "Yes." She didn't let him finish, launching herself into his arms. "Yes, Luke, always yes." He kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and gratitude into the embrace. When they parted, both were breathless. "We should do it soon," Luke said, "before Cornelius or Briggs can cause more trouble." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." They rode into town at first light, Luke wearing his best shirt and Clara in the yellow dress she'd saved for special occasions. The preacher, Reverend Mills, agreed to perform the ceremony immediately, though he insisted on asking Clara several pointed questions about her willingness first. "You're certain, Miss Morrison, marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered lightly or under duress?" "I'm certain, Reverend—" Clara's voice was steady. "More certain than I've ever been about anything." They were married in the small church with only the preacher's wife and old Tom Brennan as witnesses. Tom had appeared at the ranch before dawn, dressed in a suit that had seen better decades. "Figured you might need someone to stand up with you," he'd said gruffly. "Someone who ain't afraid of Briggs or anybody else." The ceremony was simple, the words ancient and binding. When Luke slipped his mother's thin gold band onto Clara's finger, she felt something settle into place, like a key turning in a long-locked door. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Mills said, and Luke did, thoroughly and with evident joy. They were signing the marriage certificate when the church door banged open. Harmon Briggs stood there, face flushed with rage. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. "You can't make a silk purse from a sow's ear. Gray, she's still the same piece of trash her daddy tried to sell." Luke moved faster than Clara had seen since his injury, crossing the space in 3 strides. His fist connected with Harmon's jaw with a satisfying crack, sending the bigger man stumbling backward. "That's my wife you're talking about," Luke said quietly. "Choose your next words carefully." Harmon wiped blood from his mouth, eyes glittering with hate. "Your wife, a cripple and a harlot. You deserve each other." Tom Brennan stepped forward, hand resting on his gun. "Seems to me you're outstaying your welcome. Briggs, man's got a right to get married in peace." "This isn't over," Harmon spat. "Not by a long shot." After he left, Reverend Mills cleared his throat. "I apologize for that unpleasantness. Perhaps you'd like to take your certificate and—" "Thank you, Reverend." Clara took the paper with hands that barely trembled. "For everything." Outside, Luke pulled her close. "I'm sorry. I wanted our wedding day to be perfect." "It was perfect." She touched his face gently. "You defended my honor. No one's ever done that before. Get used to it, Mrs. Gray. I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you're treated with the respect you deserve." They stopped at the land office to file Silas's will, then at the bank to inform them of their marriage. The banker, Mr. Holcomb, looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Congratulations on your nuptials," he said stiffly. "However, this doesn't change the fact that you owe $300, due in 60 days. "We'll have it," Luke said. "I hope so, for both your sakes." On the ride home, Clara leaned against Luke's shoulder. 60 days. "Can we make that much from the Mustangs?" "We'll have to. Tom knows a buyer in San Antonio who pays well for good horses." He kissed the top of her head. "We'll make it work. Clara, we have to." That night, they celebrated their marriage properly, making love with a freedom born of blessed legitimacy. Luke worshipped every inch of his new wife's body, marveling at the gift of her trust and love. Clara responded with equal passion, showing him without words that he was everything she wanted, everything she needed. "My wife," Luke murmured against her throat, tasting the salt of her skin. "Never thought I'd say those words. Say them again," Clara urged, arching beneath him. "My wife, my beautiful, brave, incredible wife." They came together with desperate intensity, sealing their union in the most primal way possible. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Clara traced the scars on Luke's chest. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing his question from weeks before. "Only one." She propped herself on an elbow to look at him. I wish Silas could have known, could have seen that his kindness brought us together. I think he did know. Luke pulled her back down against him. That comment in his will. He knew you were special. Clara, knew you were meant for this life, even if it wasn't with him. They were interrupted by hoofbeats in the yard. Luke was out of bed and reaching for his rifle in one motion, but Clara recognized the rider. "It's Miguel!" They dressed hastily and met him on the porch. The usually calm man was agitated, his horse lathered with sweat. Senora Gray." He touched his hat briefly. "I bring warning. Briggs. He meets with your cousin from Austin. They planned something. The men who work for Briggs. They drink in the cantina and talk. They say soon the ranch will belong to Senor Cornelius, and Briggs will have what he wants." Luke's expression hardened. "When?" "Soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next day. They wait for more men from Austin." After Miguel left, they sat in the kitchen, trying to plan for an attack they couldn't predict. "We could go to the sheriff," Clara suggested. "Sheriff Watson is a good man, but he won't act on cantina gossip." Luke rubbed his face tiredly. "We need to be ready for anything." They spent the next day preparing, Luke cleaning and loading every weapon they had while Clara helped Tom move their small Mustang herd to a hidden canyon where they'd be harder to steal. The will was lodged safely with the land office, but they both knew possession was 9/10 of the law in frontier Texas. "Whatever happens," Luke said that night as they lay together, "I want you to know these past months have been the happiest of my life. You brought me back from the dead. Clara gave me reason to fight again." "We're going to win this fight," she said fiercely. "We're going to save our home and raise horses and children and grow old together on this land." Luke kissed her deeply. "From your lips to God's ears, Mrs. Gray." But even as they held each other in the darkness, both could feel the storm approaching. Cornelius Gray had legal documents and money. Harmon Briggs had men and a ruthless determination to take what he wanted. All Luke and Clara had was their love, their courage, and the thin protection of a marriage certificate. As Clara drifted toward sleep, she heard Luke whisper, "I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes." She wanted to tell him they'd keep each other safe, that together they were stronger than any threat, but something in his tone, a finality that chilled her, kept the words locked in her throat. Instead, she held him tighter, as if she could keep the coming danger at bay through sheer force of will. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring, but tonight they were together, legally bound, their love a fortress against the world. It would have to be enough. The night was too quiet. Clara woke to Luke's empty side of the bed, the sheets still warm from his body. She found him at the window, rifle in hand, scanning the darkness. "What is it?" she whispered. "Maybe nothing. Thought I heard horses earlier." He didn't take his eyes from the yard. "Go back to bed." Instead, she moved beside him, peering into the moonlit landscape. Everything seemed peaceful. The barn, the corral, the garden she'd coaxed from reluctant soil. Too peaceful. "There," Luke pointed toward the rise. "Movement by the rocks." Clara's blood chilled as she made out shapes moving against the skyline. "How many?" "6, maybe 7. His voice was grim. "Get dressed, take the strongbox and the marriage certificate. If things go bad, I'm not leaving you." "Clara." "I said no." She was already pulling on her dress, hands steady despite her racing heart. "We stand together or not at all." Luke caught her arm, pulling her close for a fierce kiss. "Stubborn woman. You married me knowing that." They'd barely finished dressing when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Harmon Briggs led the group, flanked by rough-looking men Clara didn't recognize. To her surprise, Cornelius Gray rode with them, a soft-looking man in Eastern clothes who seemed uncomfortable on horseback. "Gray," Harmon's voice carried clearly. "Come on out. We've got business to discuss." Luke stepped onto the porch, rifle cradled casually in his arms. Clara followed, her own shotgun hidden just inside the doorway. "Funny time for a social call. Briggs, just wanted to make sure you were home. My associate here has something for you." Harmon nodded to Cornelius, who dismounted awkwardly. "Cousin Lucas." Cornelius's voice was thin, nervous. "I've come to claim my inheritance. This ranch rightfully belongs to me." "Already been to the land office," Luke said evenly. "They have Silas's will. Ranch goes to me." "Ah, but wills can be contested." Cornelius produced a paper from his coat. "Especially when there's evidence of undue influence. A mysterious woman appears. Silas dies suddenly. And equally suddenly, she's married to the beneficiary? Any court would find that suspicious. Silas was killed by rustlers. Everyone knows that. Do they?" Harmon's smile was ugly. "Or is that just what you wanted people to think? Man plans to marry, changes his will, then conveniently dies before the wedding, leaving everything to a brother who coincidentally marries the same woman." Clara stepped forward, fury overcoming caution. "How dare you? Shut your mouth, woman." Harmon's voice cracked like a whip. "You've caused enough trouble. Time to pay what you owe." "She owes you nothing," Luke said quietly. "And you'll speak to my wife with respect." "Your wife?" Harmon spat in the dirt. "That's what this is really about. Cornelius, you want the ranch, I want the woman. Once you've got your papers signed, she comes with me. Call it interest on her daddy's debt." "Like hell." Luke's rifle shifted slightly, the threat unmistakable. "Now, cousin," Cornelius said nervously. "No need for violence. Sign the ranch over, take the money I offered, and you can both leave peacefully. Surely that's better than—" His words were cut short by the crack of a rifle. One of Harmon's men had fired, the bullet splintering wood inches from Luke's head. Everything erupted into chaos. Luke shoved Clara inside as he returned fire, his shots disciplined despite the mayhem. Clara grabbed her shotgun, moving to a window. She'd never shot at a man before, but she didn't hesitate, peppering the ground near the attacker's feet. "The barn!" Luke shouted. "They're trying to flank us!" Two men had indeed broken off, heading for the barn's shelter. Clara reloaded with shaking hands, trying to cover both directions at once. Luke had taken shelter behind the water trough, his rifle speaking in steady rhythm. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze, the crackling of flames. "Fire!" she screamed. "They've set the barn on fire." The old structure, dry as tinder, went up like a torch, by its light. Clara could see their attackers clearly. Harmon had taken cover behind his horse, shooting wildly. Cornelius cowered behind a wagon, clearly terrified by the turn of events. "We have to save the horses!" Clara started for the door, but Luke's voice stopped her. "No, that's what they want, to draw us out!" But the screaming of the terrified animals was too much. Clara burst from the house, running for the barn. She heard Luke curse behind her, heard the whine of bullets past her ear, but she didn't stop. The barn's interior was an inferno. She managed to open the stalls, and the horses bolted past her into the night. Smoke burned her lungs as she made sure all were free, then stumbled back toward the door. A figure loomed in the doorway. Harmon, his face demonic in the firelight. "Got you now, girl?" She raised the shotgun, but he was faster, knocking it from her hands. His fingers closed on her arm, dragging her from the burning building. "No!" Luke's voice carried over the gunfire. She saw him struggling to stand, using his rifle as a crutch, trying to reach them. "Let her go! Briggs!" he shouted. "This is between you and me!" "Nothing's between you and me. Cripple, you're already dead." Harmon dragged Clara toward his horse. "Cornelius gets the ranch. I get the girl. Everyone wins except you." Clara fought wildly, nails raking Harmon's face. He cursed and backhanded her, stars exploding across her vision. Through the haze, she saw Luke limping toward them, his face a mask of desperate fury. "I said let her go!" Harmon laughed, pulling Clara against him like a shield. "What are you going to do, Gray? You can barely walk. Should have taken the money and run when you had the chance." Luke stopped, swaying slightly. Blood darkened his shirt. He'd been hit. But his eyes never left Clara's face. "I love you," he said clearly. "Remember that." Then he raised his rifle. Clara saw his intention, saw him aim not at Harmon, but at the burning beam above them, weakened by fire and ready to fall. "Luke, no!" The rifle cracked. The beam gave way in a shower of sparks and flaming debris. Harmon shoved Clara aside, trying to escape, but the massive timber caught him across the back, pinning him to the ground. His screams were mercifully brief. Clara scrambled away from the inferno, coughing and retching. She found Luke collapsed in the dirt, blood spreading beneath him. "No, no, no!" She pressed her hands against the wound in his side. "Stay with me. You promised. We were going to grow old together." His hand found hers, grip weak but determined. "You're safe. That's all that matters. Don't you dare die on me, Luke Gray. Don't you dare." The sound of approaching horses made her look up, expecting more attackers. Instead, she saw Sheriff Watson and a posse, drawn by the fire's glow. Tom Brennan rode with them, his old face grim. "Easy there, Mrs. Gray," the sheriff said, dismounting quickly. "We've got him now." The next hours blurred together. The sheriff's men rounded up Harmon's surviving gang and a terrified Cornelius, who babbled about being forced into the scheme. Someone, Tom, she thought, carried Luke to the house while someone else rode hard for the doctor. Clara never left Luke's side, holding his hand through the surgery to remove the bullet, sponging his fevered face as infection threatened. The doctor, a gruff man named Sawyer, did his best but made no promises. "Bullet went deep," he said. "Missed the vital organs, but there's damage. And with the blood he's lost." He shrugged. "It's in God's hands now." For 3 days, Luke hovered between life and death. Clara talked to him constantly, telling him about the garden that needed tending, the Mustangs that needed breaking, the life they'd planned together. "You can't leave me," she whispered in the darkest hour of the 3rd night. "Not when we've just found each other. Not when I'm carrying your child." She'd suspected for a week, but hadn't been sure until that morning's nausea confirmed it. Now she pressed Luke's hand to her still flat stomach. "You're going to be a father? Do you hear me? A father. So you have to fight. You have to come back to us." Whether it was her words or sheer stubbornness, Luke's fever broke near dawn. His eyes opened, focused and aware for the first time since the shooting. "Clara?" His voice was a rasp. "I'm here." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm right here." The baby. Did I dream that? She smiled through her tears. "No dream. We're going to have a baby." His hand tightened on hers. "Then I guess I'd better stick around." The recovery was slow. Luke chafed at the weakness, at needing help for the simplest tasks. But Clara was patient, as she'd been from the beginning, and gradually his strength returned. Tom Brennan had saved their Mustang herd, driving them to safety during the fire. The barn was gone, but the house stood, and neighbors came forward to help. People who'd whispered about the mail-order bride, but who respected courage when they saw it. Even Sheriff Watson, as he led Cornelius away in chains, tipped his hat to Clara. "You've got sand, Mrs. Gray. Your husband's a lucky man." Harmon's death ended one threat, and Cornelius's arrest ended the other. The cousin from Austin, faced with charges of conspiracy and attempted murder, quickly signed away any claim to the ranch in exchange for a lighter sentence. A month after the fire, as Luke took his first unassisted steps across the porch, Clara stood watching with one hand on her growing belly. "Look at you," she said softly. "My brave husband." He reached for her, pulling her close. "I thought I'd lost you that night, when Harmon had you." His voice broke. "But you didn't. You saved me. Again." We saved each other. He rested his hand over hers on her stomach. "And now we've got this little one to think about. Our future." Clara leaned into his strength, looking out over their land. The garden was thriving, the Mustang herd growing, and plans for a new barn were taking shape. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered a stranger's advertisement, but it was hers, built from courage and love and sheer determination. "I love you, Luke Gray," she said. And I love you, Clara Gray." He kissed her temple, forever and always. As the sun set over the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara knew they'd found something worth all the pain and struggle. They'd found home, not in a place, but in each other. And that was worth more than all the easy paths they might have taken. The baby moved under their joined hands, the first flutter of new life. Clara smiled, thinking of Silas and his inadvertent gift. He'd brought them together, two broken people who'd made each other whole. "Thank you," she whispered to the evening sky, and felt, just for a moment, an answering warmth that might have been blessing or simply the last rays of sun. Either way, she was grateful. They went inside together, Luke leaning on her just a little, Clara strong enough to support them both. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight they were together, safe and loved. It was more than enough. It was everything. The wedding was supposed to be a new beginning. Clara stood before the small mirror in her room, adjusting the simple lace collar she'd added to her best dress. 6 months had passed since the fire, and her belly showed the pronounced curve of their coming child. Luke waited in the main room, probably pacing despite his still healing injuries. They'd decided to renew their vows properly, with the whole town invited this time. It was Luke's idea, a way to show everyone that they weren't ashamed, weren't hiding, that their love was something to celebrate, not whisper about. "You ready, Mrs. Gray?" Tom Brennan's voice came through the door. The old Mustanger had become like family these past months, helping rebuild the barn and teaching Clara the finer points of horse training. "Almost, Tom." She took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back was different from the desperate girl who'd stepped off that stagecoach nearly a year ago. This woman had calluses on her hands and steel in her spine. This woman had faced down fire and violence and emerged stronger. The church was fuller than she'd expected. Senora Martinez sat in the front row, beaming. Miguel and his family had taken a whole pew. Even some of the townspeople who'd whispered the loudest had come, curiosity or conscience bringing them to witness. Luke stood at the altar, looking handsome despite his slight limp and the cane he still used on bad days. His eyes found hers, and the love there took her breath away. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Mills began, his voice carrying through the small church. "We gather today to celebrate the union of two souls who have already proven their commitment through trial by fire." Clara barely heard the words. She was lost in Luke's eyes, in the memory of all they'd overcome, in dreams of all that lay ahead. They were exchanging rings, new ones, bought with the first profits from their Mustang sales, when the church door burst open. "Stop this wedding!" Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, travel-stained and breathing hard. He was younger than Luke, with similar dark hair but softer features. Clara had never seen him before, but something about his eyes. "This woman is a fraud," the stranger announced. "She's already married." The church erupted in gasps and murmurs. Luke's face went white, then red with fury. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "Name's William Morrison," the man said, advancing down the aisle. "And that woman is my wife." Clara's world tilted. She gripped Luke's arm to keep from falling. "No, that's not... I've never seen you before in my life." "Haven't you?" William's smile was cold. "St. Louis. 3 years ago. Your father lost big at cards, offered you to cover his debts. I took that offer. We were married by a justice of the peace, all legal and proper." "That's a lie." But even as she said it, memories surfaced. That horrible night, her father dragging her to a dingy office, being forced to sign papers, say words. But she'd run before. Before. "You left me on our wedding night," William continued, addressing the crowd now. "Took the money from my wallet and disappeared. I've been looking for you ever since." Luke turned to her, his face a mask of shock. "Clara, is this true?" I don't..." She pressed her hands to her temples, trying to think through the panic. "That night is a blur. Father had me sign something, but I thought it was a debt paper. There was a man there, but I ran before anything. I swear to you, Luke, I never knew I was married. I never—" "Sheriff Watson," William called out. "I have the marriage certificate right here. Clara Morrison became Clara Morrison Hartley 3 years ago in St. Louis, making her marriage to Mr. Gray here invalid, making her a bigamist." Sheriff Watson rose reluctantly from his pew. "Let me see those papers." As the sheriff examined the documents, Clara felt her carefully built world crumbling. She looked at Luke, saw the doubt creeping into his eyes, the pain of potential betrayal. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Luke, you have to believe me. I didn't know." "Appears to be in order," Sheriff Watson said heavily. Mrs. Hartley, I'm afraid you'll need to come with me." "No," Luke stepped between them. "There has to be a mistake. Clara would never—" "Would never what?" William's voice was mocking now. "Lie, run from her obligations, seduce another man while married? Seems to me she's done all those things." Luke's fist connected with William's jaw before anyone could stop him. The younger man went down hard, blood spurting from his nose. "Luke, stop!" Clara caught his arm as he advanced on the fallen man. "This won't help." "Listen to your woman, Gray," William said, struggling to his feet. "Though I suppose she's not really yours." "Is she? She's mine. Always has been." Sheriff Watson stepped forward. "That's enough. Mrs. Hartley, you'll need to come peacefully, or I'll have to arrest you. If you take her, you take me too," Luke said flatly. "Luke, no." Clara touched his face. "I'll go. We'll sort this out. There has to be an explanation. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Someone needs to take care of the ranch, the horses." She dropped her voice. "Please, trust me. Trust us." She saw the war in his eyes. Duty against love. Trust against evidence. Finally, slowly, he nodded. The jail cell was cold despite the autumn warmth outside. Clara sat on the narrow bunk, hands folded over her belly, trying to make sense of the nightmare. William's face haunted her, familiar yet strange, like something from a fever dream. Luke came within the hour. Sheriff Watson letting him into the cell despite regulations. "Tell me everything," he said, sitting beside her. "From the beginning." So she did. Every ugly detail of that night 3 years ago. Her father's drinking, the debts, the poker game where she was the final stake, the strange men, the papers, the justice of the peace who reeked of whiskey. "I remember signing something," she said. "I remember saying words. But Father told me it was just a formality, that I was agreeing to work off his debts as a housekeeper. Then one of the men tried to touch me, and I ran. Grabbed what money I could find and ran. This William." Clara closed her eyes, trying to summon the blurred memories. "Maybe, I don't know. There were several men there. Everything was happening so fast. And Father had given me laudanum to keep me calm. Laudanum." Luke's voice was flat. "He drugged you. Said it would help with my nerves." She laughed bitterly. "I was so naive. So desperate to believe there was a way out that didn't involve, but if I really am married, we'll fight it." Luke gripped her hands. "A marriage performed under duress. When you were drugged, that can't be legal. Legal enough that I'm sitting in jail." They were interrupted by Sheriff Watson. "Mr. Gray, that Hartley fellow wants to speak with you. Both of you." William waited in the sheriff's office, his nose swollen but his smile intact. "Gray, let's discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "For me to go away, of course." William leaned back in his chair. "See, I don't really want a wife, especially not one who's carrying another man's bastard. But I've spent 3 years and considerable money tracking dear Clara down. I think I deserve compensation." "You're trying to sell her?" Luke's voice was dangerous. "Such ugly words. I prefer to think of it as accepting payment for an annulment. Say, $5,000. $5,000? Luke laughed harshly. "I don't have that kind of money." "No? Pity." William stood, straightening his coat. "Then I suppose Clara will have to come with me, as my legal wife. She's obligated to do so, of course, given her condition and history of running. I'll need to take certain precautions. The threat was clear. Clara felt Luke tense beside her, ready to violence despite the sheriff's presence. "Wait," she said. "There might be another way. The Mustangs we've been catching, they're valuable. If we sold them all." "Clara, no." Luke turned to her. "Those horses are our future, the ranch's future." "What future is there without us together?" She faced William. "Give us time. 2 weeks to raise the money." William considered. 1 week, and Clara stays in jail as insurance. Don't want her running again. "Absolutely not," Luke began. But Clara squeezed his hand. "It's all right. 1 week." After William left, Sheriff Watson cleared his throat. "I don't like this any more than you do. Man's clearly a snake. But the law is the law." "The law!" Luke spat the words. "The law that lets a man buy and sell a woman like cattle." That night, Clara lay on the narrow bunk, one hand on her active baby, the other clutching the blanket Luke had brought from home. It smelled like him, like safety and love and everything she stood to lose. She must have dozed, because she woke to voices in the outer office. Tom Brennan's gravelly tones, then Luke's, then another she didn't recognize. They were arguing about something, their words too muffled to make out. Morning brought unexpected visitors. Senora Martinez swept into the jail like an avenging angel, followed by a dozen other women from town. "This is outrage," she declared. "A woman drugged and forced into marriage, now persecuted for escaping. We will not stand for this." Sheriff Watson looked overwhelmed. "Ladies, please, I'm just upholding the law." "Then the law's wrong." Mrs. Holcomb, the banker's wife, said firmly. Clara stared. This was the same woman who'd whispered about her in the general store. Clara Gray has proven herself a good woman, a hard worker, a faithful wife. We won't see her railroaded by some Eastern confidence man. The women had brought food, blankets, and most surprisingly, money, small amounts. But when pooled together, it added up to several $100s. "For the fund," Senora Martinez explained. "To buy your freedom." Clara wept then, overwhelmed by the support of women who'd once shunned her. Perhaps her standing up to hardship had earned their respect, or perhaps they simply recognized injustice when they saw it. Luke came in the afternoon, looking haggard but determined. "Tom and I are taking the Mustangs to San Antonio. We'll get top dollar there. Should have enough by week's end." "Luke!" She reached through the bars, touching his face. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known—" "Stop," he caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. "None of this is your fault. We'll get through this. We've survived worse." But as he left to prepare for the journey, Clara wondered if that was true. They'd survived violence and poverty. But this legal trap that made her property of a stranger, how did one fight that? That night, as she tried to find comfort on the narrow bunk, the baby kicked strongly. Clara rubbed her belly, whispering to the child within, "Hold on, little one. Your papa's going to fix this. He always finds a way." But even as she said the words, doubt crept in. What if the horses didn't bring enough? What if William changed his mind, decided he wanted her after all? What if the law, in all its cold impartiality, tore apart the life they'd built with such pain and love? She thought of Luke riding hard for San Antonio, his body still not fully healed, pushing himself for her sake. Thought of the ranch sitting empty, vulnerable. Thought of all they'd overcome, only to be defeated by a piece of paper and a man's greed. "Please," she whispered to whatever power might be listening. "Haven't we earned our happiness? Haven't we paid enough?" The only answer was the whistle of wind through the barred window and the distant howl of a coyote, lonely and wild in the Texas night. The trial date arrived with the first frost of winter. Clara stood in the packed courtroom, her belly heavy with child, Luke steady at her side. The circuit judge, a stern man named Cornelius Blackwood, peered down at them over wire spectacles. "This is a complicated matter," Judge Blackwood began. "We have a marriage certificate from St. Louis, apparently legal. We have a subsequent marriage here in Texas, and we have conflicting accounts of the circumstances. William Hartley sat with his lawyer, looking confident in a new suit clearly bought with money he expected to receive. But something had changed in the weeks since Luke's return from San Antonio. There was a tension in the courtroom, an undercurrent Clara couldn't identify. Your Honor, William's lawyer began. The facts are simple. My client married Clara Morrison 3 years ago. She abandoned him, stole his money, and illegally married another man. We demand she be returned to her lawful husband, along with damages for the years of searching and emotional distress. Emotional distress, Luke muttered. I'll show him distress. Their lawyer, a sharp young man named Patterson, whom Tom Brennan had found in San Antonio, stood. Your Honor, we contest the validity of the original marriage. Miss Morrison was drugged with laudanum, coerced by her father, and had no understanding of what was occurring. Do you have proof of this drugging? The judge asked. We have witnesses, Your Honor. Clara turned, shocked. As several men entered the courtroom, she recognized one immediately. Dr. Sawyer, who'd saved Luke's life, but the others. Your Honor, Patterson continued, these men were present at the poker game in question. They've traveled from St. Louis to testify. The first witness, a weathered man named Jacob Morse, took the stand. I was there that night. He said, Morrison owed us all money. When he couldn't pay, he brought out his daughter. Girl could barely stand, eyes unfocused. Doc Sawyer here was playing cards with us. He said she'd been given enough laudanum to fell a horse. Doctor Sawyer confirmed this when called. I told Morrison it was dangerous, giving a girl that much. But he said she needed to be calm for what came next. Made me sick, but I was drunk myself and in debt. Not proud of it. And the marriage? Patterson pressed. Hartley there insisted on it, Morse said. Said he wanted it legal before he'd pay Morrison's debts. They dragged that girl to a justice of the peace, old drunk named Weatherby, who'd marry anyone for $1. Girl was mumbling. Couldn't hardly speak. Weatherby just told her to nod and marked it done. William shot to his feet. They're lying. She said I do, clear as day. Mr. Hartley, you'll have your chance to speak, Judge Blackwood warned. But the damage was mounting. More witnesses came forward, painting a picture of a sordid night where a desperate father sold his drugged daughter to the highest bidder. Clara listened with tears streaming down her face, grateful and horrified in equal measure. How did you find these men? She whispered to Luke during a recess. Tom knew some people. And it turns out your friend Hartley made enemies in St. Louis. Men he cheated, women he compromised. They were happy to speak against him for travel expenses. When William finally took the stand, his smooth confidence had evaporated. Under Patterson's questioning, his story began to unravel. You say you searched for your wife for 3 years? Yes. Yet you never filed a missing person report? Never contacted the authorities? I preferred to handle it privately. Or perhaps you knew the marriage wasn't valid, that any investigation would reveal the truth. That's not... Tell me, Mr. Hartley, what happened to Justice Weatherby? William went pale. I don't know. He died 2 years ago, Patterson said. But before he died, he signed an affidavit admitting to performing illegal marriages for money, including one between you and a drugged young woman named Clara Morrison. Patterson produced the document with a flourish. Clara gripped Luke's hand as the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Blackwood called for order. Mr. Hartley, do you have anything to say? William's lawyer whispered urgently to him, but he shook his head. The game was up, and everyone knew it. Your Honor, Patterson pressed his advantage. We also have evidence that Mr. Hartley has done this before. 3 other women in different states, all married under dubious circumstances, all paid him to go away. That's enough, Judge Blackwood said. I've heard sufficient testimony. The marriage between William Hartley and Clara Morrison is hereby declared null and void. Having been performed under duress and while one party was incapacitated, the marriage between Lucas and Clara Gray stands as valid. Clara sobbed, falling against Luke as the courtroom burst into applause, but Judge Blackwood wasn't finished. Furthermore, Mr. Hartley, you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Sheriff Watson, take him into custody." "No?" William tried to run, but was quickly subdued. As they dragged him past, he snarled at Clara. "This isn't over. You can't—" "Yes," Luke said quietly. "It is." Outside the courthouse, Clara breathed free air for the first time in what felt like years. The townspeople who'd gathered pressed forward, offering congratulations. Women who'd once whispered about her now embraced her. Men who'd avoided Luke's eyes now shook his hand. "How?" Clara asked Tom Brennan, who grinned through his whiskers. "Told you I had friends in low places. Couple telegrams, couple favors called in. Hartley wasn't as smart as he thought. Left a trail of angry people behind him. The money from the horses. Still got most of it," Luke said. "Minus travel expenses for the witnesses. Figure we can use it to buy more breeding stock. Really build something." They returned to the ranch as snow began to fall. The first of the season. The house had never looked more welcoming. Smoke rising from the chimney where Senora Martinez had kept the fires burning in their absence. That night, they lay in their bed, legally, morally, and completely theirs. Clara traced patterns on Luke's chest, still marveling at their reprieve. "I thought I'd lost you," he said into the darkness. "When they took you to jail, when Hartley appeared with those papers, I thought God was punishing me for daring to be happy." "Shh," she kissed him softly. "We're here, we're together. That's all that matters." "Clara," he pulled back to look at her. "There's something else. In San Antonio, I saw a doctor, a specialist, about my leg." Her heart clenched. "What did he say?" "There's a surgery. New technique from back east. Might help with the pain, improve the mobility. It's risky and expensive, but we'll do it." Clara didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need. It would mean weeks of recovery." "Right when the baby's due. Then we'll manage. We always do." She took his hand, placed it on her belly where their child moved restlessly. "This little one needs their papa whole and healthy." Luke pulled her close, and they made love with tender reverence. A celebration of their freedom and their future. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow renewed. Later, as Clara dozed against his shoulder, Luke whispered, "What do you want to name the baby?" "If it's a boy, Silas, for the man who brought us together. And if it's a girl," Clara smiled in the darkness, "Hope, because that's what she'll represent. Hope after hardship, love after loss. Hope Gray," Luke murmured. "I like it." 3 weeks later, as a blizzard raged outside, Hope Gray made her entrance into the world. She came quickly, as if eager to join the adventure, with Clara's determination and Luke's dark hair. Tom Brennan, who'd stayed to help with the ranch while Luke recovered from his surgery, wept openly when he held her. "She's perfect," he declared. "Gonna be a hellraiser, just like her mama." Dr. Sawyer, who delivered the baby, smiled. "Strong and healthy, though given her parents, I'd expect nothing less." Luke, still weak from his own ordeal but mobile without the cane for the first time in years, cradled his daughter with wonder. "She's so small," he marveled. "How can something so small be so perfect?" "She's ours," Clara said simply. "That's what makes her perfect." As winter gave way to spring, the Gray Ranch thrived. The Mustang operation expanded, with Tom as a partner. The garden Clara had started grew into a small farm, supplying vegetables to the town. And Hope grew fat and happy, surrounded by more love than one child could possibly need. One evening, as Clara sat on the porch Luke had built, watching him play with Hope in the yard, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate woman answering a stranger's advertisement, a broken soldier convinced he had nothing to offer, fire and violence, betrayal and false claims, all overcome by the simple power of two people refusing to give up on each other. "What are you thinking about?" Luke asked, settling beside her with Hope in his arms. "How different my life would have been if Silas had lived, if I'd married him instead." Luke was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever regret it?" "No." Clara took Hope, who immediately grabbed for her mother's hair. Silas was a good man, but he wasn't you. We weren't meant to have an easy path. Luke, we were meant to forge our own. Through fire and storm. Luke agreed, putting his arm around her. And we're still here. Still here. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Clara knew they'd found something precious and rare. Not just love, though that burned bright as ever, but partnership, trust, a shared strength that could weather any storm. Hope gurgled happily, and Clara kissed her daughter's head. This child would grow up free, would never know the desperation that had driven Clara west or the shame that had nearly broken Luke. She would know only love and possibility, the gift her parents had fought so hard to give. "I love you," Clara told Luke, the words as true as the first time she'd said them. "And I love you," he replied. "My brave, beautiful mail-order bride. Former mail-order bride." Clara corrected with a smile. "Now I'm just your wife." "Just?" Luke laughed. "You're everything. Clara Gray. Everything I never knew I needed." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they went inside together, hope safe between them. The house that had once sheltered Clara's desperation and Luke's despair now rang with laughter and love. They'd built something from nothing, created beauty from ashes, found forever in the most unlikely place. And that, Clara thought as she prepared Hope for bed, was the greatest miracle of all. Not that they'd overcome the obstacles, though they had. Not that they'd found love, though they had. But that two broken people had made each other whole, had created this life, this home, this hope for the future. The mail-order bride had come seeking a stranger and found her soulmate instead. And the cowboy she'd healed had given her something she'd never dared dream of, a love that would last a lifetime and beyond. Thank you so much for joining me on Clara and Luke's incredible journey. I hope their story of love, resilience, and triumph touched your heart as much as it did mine. Where are you listening to this tale tonight? Leave a comment below. I'd love to know if you're by a cozy fireplace, on your commute, or perhaps under the stars like our brave couple. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of romance and adventure from the American frontier. And please share your thoughts about Clara and Luke's journey in the comments. Until next time, partners.